Okay, so welcome to another episode of Petty and Profound. Today, my brother and I are going to discuss the cult classic movie Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter is Dead. Uh, Morgan, do you want to kick off to today's discussion about the movie?
Sure, sure. I uh, I remember watching it when I was about 10 years old, probably in the theaters, and I immediately thought it was the most ridiculous premise.
What?
I I was like, "There's no way this would ever happen." And then I don't know, maybe 5, 6 years later, I was like, "It's not that ridiculous a premise."
No, it's not at all.
It's
It's not at all ridiculous.
at least at 10, I was so much of a rule follower, that I couldn't possibly imagine, not notifying a parent or, just sort of like every time you have like, the phone call home, just hiding that information. It just seems like for me that was a bridge too far. But again, as I got older, I was like, oh, I can totally see that happening.
At 10, you were such a rule follower. You're still a rule follower. That's
I know. But even then, when I was older, it was more like, particularly, if you had a credit card, like I think the whole movie doesn't exist if the mom leaves a backup credit card for her kids. Like, hey, I gave some money to the babysitter, but if something bad happens, here's the backup. And then no one gets a job, and none of the plot happens. So it's interesting the way it's situated, where there is no backup. It's only the babysitter, and they're kind of on their own, but they're really motivated to not call their mom and have her come home from vacation.
forgot to do a summary or just a very
I
quick
know.
summary of
Go
what
ahead. It's okay.
the movie
Yeah,
is.
go
I
for
don't
it.
have a polished one. Just so people, for the three people that might watch this, I am
Yeah,
traveling
at least
and
five.
I'm in a
At least
hotel.
five.
Yeah, so Morgan has said my background is creepy, so I apologize for anyone who might see this and be triggered by my creepy hotel room in the background. But the plot of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead is there are five children, the oldest of which is Christina Applegate, who plays Sue Ellen, aka Swell. And she's 18, and she has four younger siblings. They have a single mom. They live in California. Single mom has decided to go on a trip to Australia with an unnamed and unseen boyfriend. She does not feel comfortable leaving all of her children to fend for themselves over the summer break. She's going to be gone for about 2 months. So she hires a very old lady, Mrs. Sturak, looks as old as time, to watch over them. And the children are not happy about this. They want their freedom. Shortly after she takes over when the mom leaves, she turns out to be very nasty and have an iron fist. But she dies within like a day of moving into the house to watch over the kids. The kids do not want their mom to come back from vacation. They don't want any of their mom's friends to help. They just don't want to be under the thumb of any sort of adult. And so they decide to kind of rough it together over the summer and try to be independent. And unfortunately, as Morgan alluded to, they the mom leaves cash with the babysitter. When she dies, she apparently has that money on her person. They drop her off in a large
Like a
luggage
trunk.
box. Yeah, trunk. Nice old lady died of natural causes, and so they're broke. And so they have to figure out how are they going to fend for themselves for the summer. Ultimately, they flip a pizza box, not a coin. Christina Applegate has to get a job, enters the real world, and so hijinks and all sorts of crazy things happen as Christina Applegate tries to navigate the working world. Um, so yeah, I think that's a general summary. I'm not gonna go into the details of what happens. I imagine we'll get into that more, you and me. It's
Yeah, I
funny
think
that
that's a
you
really good
say
summary.
it's funny that you say it's unrealistic because, when I was looking over, first of all, some of the other movies we've talked about, there's lots of trivia online to be dug into, especially Death Becomes Her. Not so much for this, very little. But the reviews that I saw when this movie came out, everyone really panned it for being unrealistic. And I think that's really unfair. I think it's, first of all, I remember like a year or two ago seeing an article about how some teenage boy literally was impersonating being a physician. And he did it at several like doctor's offices and got away with it. And amusingly, my first thought was clearly I'm just not applying myself. Because if this like 17-year-old could just buy a white lab coat and pretend to be a physician and get away with it and like get hired at places, like, you know, eh, how unrealistic is it for a very adult looking 18-year-old Christina Applegate to become an administrative assistant? She's not doing surgery. She's not, I mean, it wasn't a really complicated job. She was just pretending to be, 7 years older. So I don't think it's that unrealistic. But what's most unrealistic is, disposing of a dead body and no police investigation happening as a result of it. That's honestly what I think is most unrealistic. But
Yeah, but I think at least on that last point, I think there were they dropped her off at like a funeral home, in a trunk, uh, which normally would, call some questions. But again, if they found a large sum of money on her, then maybe it was sort of like both sides were kind of
yeah,
maybe motivated not, and it's pretty self-evident that the deceased you know
very old,
could very well have died of natural causes. So
very old.
I don't know. I mean, I think they might have been willing to look the other way.
Maybe, maybe. As someone who has watched a million crime shows, I know that even if it looks like natural causes, even if someone's very old, if it's even vaguely suspicious, they usually investigate it. Another thing that couldn't be done today is, if there were cell phones, that would be something very that the police could track very easily, and so they would know like who dropped it off. It could probably be tracked down pretty seamlessly with cell phone data. But back in the analog days of the late 80s, early 90s, you had a lot more privacy, and like you said, fewer people were using credit cards, so everything was cash.
Yeah, I want to revisit the cell phone comment later because I have some additional thoughts on that.
Okay. I think, it's funny. This actually got, you probably mentioned it, got really poor reviews. I think it's something like 35%. I have my notes over there, which I conveniently left out of reach. But about 35% on Rotten Tomatoes, like really bad critic report or critic reception. And uh, which is funny. I think the director for this movie, he actually directed Bill and Ted's Adventure.
Excellent adventure. Excellent
Excellent
adventure.
Adventure. And interestingly, when the movie was reviewed, a lot of the critics say it was like a combination of that movie and Home Alone, and then like thrown a little bit of Working Girl and like spit it together, and you have
Sure.
this movie. And I feel like that's really unfair. Like, granted, yes, Home Alone, small child left at home, no parents, has to fend for himself. But like, I mean, how many romantic comedies are there out there? How it's like it's just so reductive to be like, oh, it's kids home alone or home by themselves, no parents. It's a carbon copy of, this Macaulay Culkin movie. Totally disagree. I don't think it is at all. I also read that the writer of the movie was inspired by the 1983 movie Risky Business with Tom Cruise in it. So, again, a young man who is thrust into the adult world while his parents are out of town, and he prevails over a myriad of challenges. And so, when the writer sat down to do this movie, that was his inspiration. And maybe that's why I liked it so much as a kid. Um, what I liked is that the children, first of all, they're struggling even before the mom leaves for her vacation. You see the house, it's very dilapidated. They're obviously not a very tight family. The kids, there's not a lot of control with the kids. They're kind of off doing their own things. Kenny is a very stereotypical stoner. Uh, the younger daughter seems a little sadistic. But and then Christina Applegate is very disengaged as well. And I get the feeling that the mom is just overwhelmed. Their biological father is only mentioned two times, I think. The first is the mom is says something like, "Well, do you want me to call your dad?" Or no, Christina Applegate says, "I miss dad," and your mom's like, "No, you don't." And then when they realize they have no money, they say, "Should we call dad?" And one child responds, "He doesn't care." And then the third child says, "We could blackmail dad." So, like, clearly bad relationship with the biological father. So yeah, kind of a little bit of a broken family. Granted, they say they're living in the boonies, but they can't be doing too bad to have such a large house in, I guess, the boonies of LA. So, yeah, I like that the family's a little bit broken. They're a little shiftless at the beginning, and mom is clearly overwhelmed. Who also is never named in the movie, just mom. But mom leaves, and I like the fact that the children, like, there's this coming of age story where they really have to kind of pull themselves up by the bootstraps and take responsibility for their own fate. And so, in a weird way, in doing so, they're able to kind of turn around their shiftlessness and find a sense of autonomy and agency. And maybe as a kid, I liked this story of, turning their life around and making it better, and everyone coming out on the other end a better, more fulfilled human being. So maybe like
Everyone
8-year-old me
except the
would feel like that.
babysitter.
Huh?
I said everyone except the babysitter.
Well, she was like, what, 90 something? She had a good life. And
Yeah, I
yes,
mean,
she died of natural causes. It was
going
her time. It was her time.
right. Going back to your point about sort of comparing it to other movies, I don't think it's similar to Home Alone at all.
I know.
Um, even though they're both, quite obviously films about kids being left at home to sort of fend
Yes.
for themselves. I mean, I feel like Home Alone is in a lot of ways, a comedy, but a physical comedy. It's almost like
Yes.
slapstick, where it's like paint
Like a
cans,
Tom and
people
Jerry.
falling down. Yeah, Tom and Jerry, the Three Stooges. It's a lot of physical comedy, and you don't take really any of it seriously. But with this, everything's kind of serious. It's kind of like, oh well, like we need to oh, we need to take our brother to the hospital, or oh, we need to buy groceries, or oh, we need to host this event. We need to get things in order. Like so, it's serious, and I think I mean it's classified as a dark comedy, but I like your characterization of it as it's really a coming of age story. And you're right that pretty much all the characters except the babysitter really come out better at the end, and much more responsible, much more respectful, and a lot more mature. A lot. Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
Again, it's funny because even though Sue Ellen comes of age and she kind of finds herself, like, she's really into fashion. She gets a job at a fashion company, even though it's for school uniforms. It's not the glamorous fashion she was hoping to work in. It's funny because she ultimately learns that being adult kind of sucks. Because
Yeah,
in the beginning, she's fantasizing about independence, and a lot of even Kenny, they fantasize about not having adults tell them what to do. But ironically, when they get a taste of that independence, they realize it's not nearly as much as it was cut out to be. So, Christina Applegate has this. There's this interesting interplay between her and the second oldest brother, Kenny, because they have this like these marital spats where he's at home cleaning and
Sure.
cooking, and he feels like he's not being appreciated.
Appreciated.
Right. Yeah, and Christina Applegate is like, "Well, I have to fight traffic in a Volvo. I'm
Right. I
in
have to wake up
meetings. Someone,
early.
yeah, yeah, I have to wake up early." And so like they're both it's very
Right.
cliche, but it's funny that it's playing out in these young people. And there's this quote where she's getting their kids ready in the morning. She fixes them this enormous ridiculous bowl of cereal because she doesn't want to make them like a real breakfast. And she's like,
Yeah,
"Enjoy
it's like
your
a
childhood." And
yeah,
it's
yeah, it's like
it's
a
almost like
mixing
the
bowl.
author, the writer of this movie is saying that to children from his own perspective, because as most adults would say that, like don't wish your childhood away, because adulthood does suck in a lot of ways. It's not fun and it's not glamorous. And so it's interesting. This story tells you two things. One, you can accomplish a lot when you're responsible, and you can really achieve many great things, but it comes with the price of freedom that is associated with childhood.
Yeah, in some ways, it reminds me of a graduation card I got after college, which was, it was like, hey, congratulations, you're going to do great things. But like the card was like, but just so you know, the real world starts at 5:30 a.m. Like it's, like that's going to be the next, 40 to, 60 years of your life, depending on how long you work. Um, but yeah, it was, and then when I saw the alarm, like, because she was trying to beat traffic, I was like, yep, it's a very, it's a very different vibe. And also, she and the boyfriend, you know,
Josh
when
Charles,
they're right, Josh Charles, when she's first at her first job, not the fashion job, when she's at the
Clown
Coney
Dog,
Dog, yeah,
Clown
the
Dog.
clown dog place. Uh, there she's just starting to kind of formulate like what's your plan, like what's your 5-year plan, what's your 10-year plan. And you can tell pretty quickly she's like, I don't want my 5-year plan to be cleaning fat vats, like that's not happening. But it's interesting because I don't think she'd really thought or ruminated on that question up to that point, like what is my 5-year plan. I think she had a 5-month plan, spend some time at the beach with her friends during the summer, but that's not a long-term plan. And I think, even by the end of the movie, she clearly has a much more concrete, 5 to 10 year plan than she did before, which is great.
Yeah. I really like the Josh Charles character in this movie. He's fun. And first of all, that man has not aged a day. Like, I
Not at
want
all.
whatever
Yeah.
fountain of youth serum he's had, because wow, he looks fantastic for it's like 40 years later, and we're not 40, like 30-ish years later, but looks great. Just gotta say that right there.
Yeah. I really liked him in the Good Wife. Like he's like a big time like law firm partner in the Good Wife, and he's not that different of a character, but he's just like all grown up in that series. But he's well intentioned, handsome-ish, but not like overpoweringly. So he's
Not
not
mean,
like
man.
you never. Yeah, you wouldn't call him like a heartthrob, but it's like
Attractive.
yeah, yeah. So
So it's funny, like again, the clown dog is it's an interesting first attempt at getting a job. And one, I wouldn't imagine that character would ever even like unless she was just absolutely desperate. Like she said, I could get a job at a clothing store. Why didn't she apply to any of those? Is this a really bad economy in in this world? Like I'm shocked that she went for clown dog. I think anybody could see that you'd be smelling like nasty cooked meat and just grease
sure.
working at clown
Well, I
dog.
mean, I think part of it is they need to have some sort of way for her to meet the boyfriend character, and yeah, certainly it's if the movie had been made, 8 or 9 years later, they'd both be working at Abercrombie and Fitch. But it's in that one. It's sort of like I'm sure she just like, oh, help wanted. Let's apply there. And again, like he definitely has sort of a pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of mentality, and I think she's like, yeah, no, thank you. Like, I'll be picking a different path, up to the top, and I'll see you up there. But I'm not cleaning these, you know, these hot dog, tanks and all these other things.
Yeah. And the boss is really amusing there. He's the guy with he looks like a man with a perm. I don't know if it's a perm, but he has this big
Yeah,
like SpongeBob. Not SpongeBob. Who's the in the
The
Simpsons one?
Simpsons. Yeah,
Yeah,
slideshow Bob.
Slideshow Bob. He looks
Yeah,
like him, and it's funny how that last line of his, he's like, "You're almost doing it right," and she's like, "Oh, I need more
right.
cleanser," and he's like, "No, you need to be doing it
You
with
need
a
a
happy
smile.
face." Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's not even that big of a stretch. I remember I had a boss, like, after I gave my notice because I was moving, she was like, really good work, but I just never got the feeling that you loved it. And I'm like, since when do
yeah.
I have to love it? Like,
It
no,
reminds
mhm.
it reminds me a little bit of Office Space,
Yes,
where the Jennifer Aniston character, she has to wear 37 pieces of flair, and the
yes,
boss is like, "Hey, you're only wearing 37." She's like, "I thought that's what I had to do." He's like, "Yeah, but that's just the minimum. We want you to go
yes,
beyond the minimum." She's like, "I just tell me how many I have to wear. Like, I don't want this to be a guessing game."
yes,
But yeah, because like I feel like in a lot of industries, particularly at that time, it's like, okay, well, we're going to set the minimum, but then we want this additional the minimum over performance to
yes.
actually be satisfactory.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like,
And
oh, I didn't for me, it's like I thought just doing my job and getting positive
uh,
feedback from clients and making money, like little did I thought that was enough. But apparently I have to come in, and love it. Like it has to be,
yeah,
my lifeblood. And like that kind of offended me at that time because I was like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna love it. And I don't wanna be Jennifer Aniston. I don't wanna have to put like guess how much flair I have to wear. And I don't
yeah,
wanna do this performative, I this is my life. So I
yeah.
resonated with that.
It's also a little bit generational. I saw some clip recently where it's like Gen Z, who's currently, taking sort of those types of jobs. They don't like smiling at customers. They don't like looking at, like, they don't like eye contact. And like that, in
Okay.
this movie, that would not have been tolerated. Like, you got to have
Yes.
a big smile, like a
Yes.
smile is part of your outfit. It's like, in
Yep.
today's generation, they do not, sort of feel that way. So I think that's kind of funny because you and I definitely had bosses along the way. They're like, "Hey, you gotta, there's showmanship, there's salesmanship. You gotta really smile. It's there's a little bit of faking it, and it's not bad, but that's that's also part of being an adult. I know in law school, there was a professor, who taught a class called faking it, and it's
No.
it's about, yeah, it was, what was called, yeah.
My gosh, I
I
wanna I wanna know about the faking it class.
I didn't take it. It was a really
Aw.
popular class. I tried to get in, but it was limited, and I didn't get a slot.
Well, okay, what was
So
this? I need to know what the syllabus was. Like, what did one learn in faking it?
yeah, I mean, I think the premise of it was like, look, in a lot of, first of all, relationships and jobs, people pretend the behaviors, and then they become learned and they become part of it. So like if you're
That's true.
pretending to
That's
be
true.
successful, or you're pretending to do the right things, like those, and again, like the smiling, all that stuff, it starts to become ingrained. It starts to become, and I think a lot of that's true in terms of going above and beyond. just certain things. It's like, look, there's gonna be times in all of our lives where it's like you're having a difficult day as a parent, or a difficult day as a job, or a difficult day with a partner. It's like you gotta fake it, just to get through, and make sure everything's fine, and that you and the more you do it, the better you get. But like, I always thought it was funny because it was probably a pretty useful class, but
Yeah.
didn't wasn't able to learn it.
Honestly, that could be a great book because, and I've heard like psychologically, like they say, like part of changing as a human being is quote unquote faking it. Like you look at the person you want to be, like I want to be a healthy person, or, I want to
Yeah,
exercise more. And like, it's not whether you feel like doing it, like being someone who does those things, you have to first do it. And so, like, are you an
yeah,
athlete? No. But if I walk every day, I'm at least getting closer to being an athlete. Or, like say someone's a smoker. I was listening to this one thing. This lady, she was talking about she would be driving down the road holding her ciggy, like blowing out the window, saying, "I hate smoking. Smoking's disgusting. I don't smoke." Like, but apparently, like the mind works in mysterious ways, and if you say things enough and believe things enough, suddenly beliefs become more of your identity. And so, yeah, I struggle with the faking it concept because, like, I thrive and believe very deeply in authenticity. And so, like, being fake at my, like, gutturally really bothers me. And when I was an RA, there was this other RA who always talked about faking it till you make it. And I was like, ugh, like, just couldn't stand that girl because she seemed really fake to me. And I was just like, or you
yeah.
could be honest about your struggles and we could have a good conversation about it. But, you said there are times as an adult where you do have to fake it and you have to show up when you don't feel like showing up, or smiling when you don't feel like smiling. So, I feel like there's a balance there. And I don't feel like there are enough movies that honestly explore like the grind of adulthood. Like you said, you mentioned Office Space. I think it's a millennial and Gen X uh it's a diamond for us, and it really showed us, like, some of the fakeness, the shallowness of, like, the corporate world, but it also speaks to the fact that, like, that's what a lot of people have to do to earn a living, and they need to learn how to navigate those weird dynamics, um, and another thing is, like, how many movies are there that, for women, how many movies actually show women navigating the working world? I liked that Christina Applegate had to deal with that Gus guy who's like a Me Too case study waiting to happen. I think most women, a lot of women have gone through that. And I don't feel like it's talked about enough. Like, granted, he's treated kind of cartoony, but I don't think it's explored seriously enough or often enough in movies for my liking.
I liked how confident she was, like how Christina Applegate, and I kind of viewed it as sort of like, if you're, her and her friends, I don't know if they did modeling normally or if they just were naturally beautiful like models, but it was interesting because I'm like, when she handled sort of like the Me Too coworker, I think it's Gus, with
Yeah.
sort of, with really, really smoothly. I thought she handled it with aplomb. And I was like, yeah, but she's probably been hit on like every day for the last 3 years, even though she's a teenager. She's probably had to deal with that a lot,
three
and that's
years.
sad. But yeah, and I'm like, and then also like, as a, and I was like, as a character, but then also Christina Applegate, like I'm sure she's been having to deal with it even longer, like in her like, so
As an
she probably
actress?
has to deal with, yeah, she probably has to deal with that 10 times a day. And it's just like, effortlessly, no, you're you're back to you're banished, get out, like no
Yes.
interest. um so yeah, I thought she handled it pretty well. And you're right, it's not really explored at all. And it's funny because, like all the little things that people have to get used to when they first start working, like for I thought it was funny, the outfits. When you first get
Oh, the
your
outfits
your
were
first,
amazing.
yeah, but a
Amazingly
lot of them were
awful.
from her. But but a lot of them were her moms. So like, I know for me, when I first started my real job, you're like, hey, you have to have this outfit. You have to have, you
Your
have to,
costume.
have, yeah, you have to have your pressed, khakis, or you have to, whatever it is you're doing, you need to fit the role. Even when I was a waiter, it's like, okay, you need your apron. It needs to be starched and pressed, and this is these are the other articles you need. You need to be able to make change. Back then, you needed to have a lighter in case one of your customers, needed a light. So it's like it was all like knowing how to navigate that, and she just picked it up instantaneously.
Very shrewd. She was very
Yeah.
shrewd. Um, and another thing to navigate there, it was Carolyn, the original admin, who is tends or turns out to be Josh Charles's sister, older sister, and she, of course, is just vile from the beginning. Uh, but I think it does speak to realities in the workplace. Not necessarily someone who's mean to you instantly, but you will be competing for positions. And if you are selected over another colleague, there will be jealousy. And like, so there, it speaks to that. And I don't think, again, I don't think enough movies that talk about young adulthood or even the workplace address just the dynamics of a workplace. And so she was obviously very hostile towards Christina Applegate in general, but she didn't like that she usurped her for that higher level position. And so again, I just think I it's more educational than one might think for a dark comedy about the dead babysitter. It's just about what to expect in a modern workplace. And so I liked that.
Yeah, and the point you make up about, there's always going to be rivalries when there's sort of it's a zero sum game if there's one promotion that can be handed out, but also like the very clear realities of favoritism, in the sense that even even beyond the receptionist, like there were, like the other person that was helping her with like the reports, she
Yes.
didn't even bother applying for that job.
No, she said I tried.
um
She said I wasn't qualified, or I they
yeah.
decided said I wasn't qualified.
So, but it just goes to show you. And then also when Rose, Christina's mentor, the thing she values most is that she vibes. She doesn't like one of the other people, and she vibes with her. So like, she's willing to like overlook a lot of things, familiarity, and then also, unfortunately, the fact that she lied on her resume and was a Vassar girl or whatever. She's like, yeah, that's enough. Like I'm vibing with you. You have the right credential. You're in. It doesn't even matter that the credential's false, because at the end of the movie, when she finds out, she's like, I'll hire you anyway. And it just goes to show you that like a lot of these career paths, they're not this very sort of logical. Yeah, they're not linear stepping stones. Like sometimes it's like, oh, if you have the in, or someone likes you, or you can, there's other paths, and some people climb a lot faster, and that's, in the real world, that's frustrating, for a lot of people, because they want it to be more linear, they want it to be more egalitarian, it's not fair.
Yes, and I think you and I have talked about this a lot over the years, and I want to believe in a meritocracy, but I like the corporate world has shown me that, obviously you have to have some credentials, but like at the end of the day, it really is, do you vibe with these people? Like the best
No,
job interviews I've ever had, it's very rarely about the qualifications for the job.
no.
Like that's just gets me into the interview, but then we just have a conversation, and do I like this person? It's like the president question, would I want to have a beer with this person? And yeah, it's usually, what shows do you like? What do you do in your free time? Oh, you seem relatively smart. I can work with you. And like then you get the job. And so I think that that's a truism that the movie accurately captures.
I guess the last point I'd make on that is, Carolyn, I think that's her name. The receptionist, her boyfriend, who's played by David Duchovny.
Yes.
He, famous of the X Files. he quite astutely says, "Look, like when Carolyn finds out that she's
He's like, she
falsified
loves
her
her. She don't
resume."
care.
Yeah, and he's like, "Look, it's not gonna matter. Like, she loves her. Like this is just gonna blow up in your face. She'll throw it back on you." He's like, "You got to realize you've lost." And like that's an important lesson too, because like sometimes in job world and corporate setting, you have to realize like, look, they're however they got into that role, they're doing a good job now, or
Yes. It
like
doesn't matter.
that yeah, that person loves them. They do not care. And but like she doesn't she has she has an axe to grind. She doesn't want to let it go, and she toward the end of the movie, she brings it up, and she just
Gets rebuffed.
gets yeah, she gets rebuffed and laughed at. She's like, "Oh, the equivalent, like, did you Photoshop this? Did you use the copy machines to come up with this nonsense?" When really, she was accurate. It was a fake resume, and she had a school ID and like a driver's license showing her real age.
Yeah, another thing that didn't age well, and I'm sure you noticed this, is like so much smoking in the movie. Like Christina
Oh
Applegate
yeah, I
is
mean, even at the
always
very
smoking in the
beginning.
office. They're smoking
Yeah,
together.
in the
Uh,
office. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I noticed that. That was one of my observations. It's just like, yeah, it's before they did all the indoor smoking bans, no cigarettes on airplanes yet, no. I mean, yeah, because it goes and it happens pretty quick. I mean, in 1991, she's smoking, and definitely 10 years later, no one's smoking.
Gone. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that happened. Like a lot of those happened right when I was in college. So
yeah,
a lot of the laws. Oh, what else? Um, the Zach, the guy who plays Zach, he died at 24 of a drug overdose.
I know. It's sad, and it's the other thing I researched and found is they cut a lot of the scenes. They cut a lot of his scenes because he was having issues, substance abuse issues, and they just couldn't use the scenes, or he'd show up and he wouldn't be in condition to shoot. So it's sad because he was one of the younger actors, but like and it's interesting. I mean, talking about coming of age, like that's a hazard, and that's certainly a hazard within any industry, but also the acting industry, perhaps even more acutely.
I read when they were, trying out for their roles or auditioning, Kenny, he was actually 20 years old and his hair actually it was cut like short as as he does
Like a
later in
crew
the
cut.
movie.
Yeah.
And they told him he looked too old for the role. And he came back with a wig and like ripped up jeans and like pretending to be a stoner. And they're like, "You're hired. You got it." But he was 2 years
Yeah.
older than Christina Applegate. But it shocked me. Christina Applegate was like 18 when she made that
I
movie,
think
but
like 17, 18, right around there. Yeah.
looks
It
older.
was,
She
yeah.
does look like an
Yeah.
adult. She looks like an adult. I also read, who knows if this is true, but she gained 10 pounds, just to have the slight more baby face, a little more padding. And she had to lose that
Sure.
pretty quick to go back to Married with Children, where she played a very uh, lean, like little sex pot
Sure.
daughter. But it was interesting. I loved that show. I think I don't know if you watched it with me much, but I watched it a lot. Married with
Oh, I
Children.
watched it all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so good. Loved it. Loved it.
Yeah. I haven't rewatched it. I mean, the last time I probably watched it was like fifth or sixth grade. So it's been
Watched
a
one or two
long
episodes
time.
in the past like 10 years, and it's interesting. It feels a lot slower than, I feel like
Yeah,
all of our attention spans have, turned into like goldfish attention spans, just with modern media. So it's funny when you watch things that you used to watch, 30 years ago, and it's like, wow, this feels a little slow. Feels a little slow. But it's still great. I love my dark comedies. So, it's funny. So I've told you about the show, The Rehearsal, uh, on HBO, and season two, there's this pilot, and he's really awkward, like he just doesn't know how to be around women. Like he's obviously interested in dating women, but like has no game whatsoever. And like this is a trend I'm keeping track of, like just in the news. And it was like only like 28% of single women right now consider themselves to actually be looking for a relationship, compared to like 60% of single men who are looking for a relationship. And that it, when they dig into it, a lot of young women feel that like men just don't really offer a lot. Like one, they don't have game, or two, like they're just at home playing video games. And so, when I see the Harl, I keep calling him Harles. I had a boss with the last name Harles, Josh Charles. When I see that character, I'm like, for a guy who's working at Clown Dog, he has a lot of game. He's inviting her to the Grunions, watching the turtles. He takes her, cute little
So wait,
trips
wait,
to the store.
quick timeout. Quick timeout. For the longest time, I thought the grunions were turtles. They're not. They're like a specific type of fish.
I
I
thought
was
they were
like, because I
turtles.
was like, no, no.
When
For
they were
years and
kissing, they
years,
flop around. I
that
wasn't
yeah,
sure.
they're flopping around, but they're fish. They're
I thought
silverfish.
they were turtles.
I looked it up, and they're like, yeah, the grunion season is like a thing, and there's like a specific type of fish in like Southern California. But yeah, because for years and years, I was like, but they don't look like turtles. They look more like eels or something like. I'm like, what are these things? But
Wow.
yeah, they're fish. But I just wanted to, because I researched that.
Thank you.
What is a grunion? Yeah, what is a grunion? But going back to your question about game, like I think there's a lot of different things going on. I think part of it is, the I think part of it might be game. I think part of it might be, like different age groups. Like I read some study recently where it's like, okay, well, of the people that are dating, of the percentage of women that are dating, a lot of in their 20s, a lot of them are dating, like men in their,
Yes,
women in their late
older.
20s are frequently, yeah, older. So like
Because
you
their
can't
snavel said
always
dub.
compare apples to apples, but then you also look at, okay, well, what are the relative graduation rates like from college? And it's like, okay, well, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was still predominantly men,
Men.
and now I think the
It's
graduates,
flipped.
it's
It's
reversed.
flipped.
Yeah, it's flipped. So it's sort of like, it's very difficult, to compare apples to apples. But yeah, it's weird. It's in terms of a show like this, a movie like this, where it's sort of there's like a 2 or 3 year age gap between the two. That seems more like when we grew up. But now, yeah, it's if people aren't thinking about, and also just talking in general, like they didn't have phones back then. You had to talk to everyone. You had to have eye contact. All your jobs had a lot of chit chat. So I think it's sort of a little bit of a lost social ability.
So, I think we're at an hour. Any other comments? What would you give the movie, Morgan?
Um, well, let me. I said I was going to talk about cell phones real quick.
Okay.
Um, so one other thing I find interesting is, as a parent, I track my kids on their cell phones all the time. So like even when I'm in a foreign country, I'm like, oh, where are they at? So like another reason this movie would be implausible today is I'd be like, why are they at this office building downtown? Where are they? And
Yeah.
I
You
track them.
track your
I
kids.
track them. Yeah, yeah, I mean, because that's what. So, like, yet another reason why it wouldn't work nowadays. I don't know. Like, this movie is maybe one of my sentimental favorites. Um, you said it was rated 35%. I think that's unfair.
Way unfair.
I would
I
give it
have
at
seen
least a six or
much higher rated movies that suck.
yeah, I would give it at least a 6 or a 7. I'd probably split the difference and give it a 6.5. But for sentimental reasons, I might bump it up to a 7.
That's how I feel. And it's like what is the purpose of a movie? I guess when you're a film critic, you have different criteria. And was it particularly original? maybe not. But at the end of the day, as a viewer, as a person of the audience, I want to be entertained and uplifted. And it didn't, I never thought there was no part of this movie where maybe the fashion show, but I was like, I was never like, this is stupid and this is a waste of my time. And so many movies that I watch now, I'm just like, ugh, it's not even interesting. So I would give it a 7. I really liked it. Obviously, it's not Citizen Kane, but just for me, from my childhood, I have a special place for it in my heart.
Well, one of the things I like about, and this is kind of coming full circle to your point at the beginning about everyone finishes the movie better off. One thing I like about it is, yeah, I feel like, at least in that era, there was a sense that you could find yourself.
Yes,
Even like the Kenny character, he's like, hey, he clearly likes cooking. He's like, maybe I'll take some culinary school. Maybe he became a chef, and like, everyone has different paths, and I think that's great. But like, part of the problem is, you know, for so much of it, for so much of life, a lot of times I think people follow other paths or follow general paths and don't necessarily have an opportunity to find what they really like, because they're just like, okay, well, I'm going to school, but maybe he'd never really been exposed to cooking. Maybe he'd never really tried it before. So I one thing I like, and one thing I like about it is that, like, it kind of gives you a little bit of confidence. Like, look, even though the real world is out there, you can pivot, and you can figure it out, and you can find some things that you're interested in. And I thought it was good because, like, even among his friends who you called like the stoners, like, not all the stoners stay stoners. Like, some of them
yes,
figure it out. Like, some
yeah,
of them get real jobs and some of them grow up. And I like it that there's sort of the opportunity. There is an opportunity to find yourself. Um, so that's I guess that's my favorite part about it, is like both with the Christina Applegate character and then the Kenny character, to a lesser extent the younger ones, but like they all kind of find themselves a little bit, and I like that. I feel like now things are maybe a little bit more dystopian, and it's like it's easy to be dystopian, but it's not always easy to be hopeful and be like, oh well, I'm gonna go to culinary school, or I'm gonna become a fashion mogul. Um,
yeah.
so I like that.
One beef I have with this movie, and a lot of movies with a female main character in the workforce, and I don't like it's obnoxious. Why are women always like they are given like 3 jobs? Women can have 3 jobs. And if a woman is working in the business world, it always has to be in fashion. Fashion, fashion. Like think about 13 going on 30. She works for a
Devil Wears
fashion.
Prada.
Yes, it's like, can a woman not be successful in anything that doesn't involve clothes or makeup? I mean, come on. Like,
Sometimes they do like literary. Sometimes they'll work at like a book
very
seller, or like
artistic
a,
still, it's
yeah,
never STEM, never STEM. Yeah,
yeah.
like why couldn't she be? I mean, granted, cooking is still technically more female focused, but like, heaven forbid she go into woodworking. No, but like, or she learns how to like do machine work. I don't know, but I am waiting for a movie that has a woman in a leadership position or succeeds in a non-traditional or non-safe female category. And it like that like it puts a bee in my bonnet. I don't it just bugs me. I feel like it's really limiting for other young ladies who are watching these movies. Like, can we not play in any other spaces? So,
Yeah, I mean, what would you want? Would you want like an engineering firm, or like
sure.
what would you want? Would you want it to be like a tech startup where it's like a robotics tech startup?
Yes. Yes, that would be amazing. Like it just seems like she can only like women characters, women leads can only it's only safe for them to do really well in a role that a man wouldn't want, you know?
What you could do is sort of like an Elizabeth Holmes Theranos thing, but like without the fraud
Yes.
allegations.
Yes.
Or there was that other woman. What was her name? Charlie something, where she had the company and like she tricked the banks by having like the data fill it out, and the only reason they caught her is because, or one of the reasons they caught her is because she used AI to like fill out the whole Excel spreadsheet. Like no one ever gets to the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, but in her, with her
Love that.
data, you
I
know.
love that.
But yeah, like I think in those two, I think if you use settings like that, um, it's I think there's definitely some movies out there that could be because yeah, like that's the first one's like med tech. There's no reason there can't be more, you know, women CEOs, but also just women in tech job movies.
Because there are women, like there are plenty of women in the real world who have succeeded and done really cool things in the non-fashion, non-literary world. And so like, and I understand it's really for visual purposes with a fashion show, that's very helpful. But like, let's break out of the box a little bit here. We could tell a cool story if you just stretched it a little bit. And so the next time I see another woman who's like, I'm going to be in charge of a magazine, although they're
Yeah.
dead basically now, but like something similar, a social media company.
What
Like, come on, we can do better.
what they
Let's think a little bit
what
out
they
of the box.
could do what they could do is they could do like a Bill Gates, but not as Bill Gates, but like as a woman. Like as like a woman starting a software company in the late '70s, early '80s. Like
Yes.
I think that would be really interesting. Like I think that would be
Yes.
like yeah,
Yes.
because you
Yes.
could tackle a lot of the other. It would still be super cool too. I mean, you could
It would.
still
It would. And there, I know there are young women who like win all these, STEM contests for coming up with, cool technology. They exist. It's just no one's made a movie about it. But I'm
yeah.
not a huge feminist.
So
What?
here's the thing though. Like, do you think that's an ideas problem, or do you think that's like a Hollywood problem?
Both.
Because
I
it's
think.
possible there's hundreds of maybe manuscripts and screenplays, but for whatever reason Hollywood's like, yeah, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way. So where do you
Well,
think the cause is?
so many. For one, like right now, Hollywood is very risk averse. That's why you
Yeah.
see like 18 sequels to like Marvel movies because they just want
Yeah.
it's all about business now. So you don't really I think Ross Douthat for New York Times, he does a podcast and he's talking about how like the population is really declining and he was talking about how oddly there are no romantic comedies for adults anymore.
What do you mean
They just don't make,
population?
huh?
What do you said the population's declining?
Yeah, the US population, like the birth rates
Oh.
plummeted.
Oh, okay.
And And he was talking to this one lady, and like one aside was, he's like, even in modern media, you don't even see romantic comedies for adults anymore. You don't really see a lot of adult themed content
Right.
in
You
filmmaking.
know, the problem, it's because Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan just aged out of those roles,
Yes,
and
they
they were just
did. Yes,
carrying the whole industry on their backs.
yes.
And once once that stopped happening, then there was no one else to make them.
It died with
And
their
it's
youth.
and it's
Another,
sad because I feel like romantic comedies, although they're often oversimplified, they're so rewatchable. Like I love rewatch. Like there's so many romantic comedies that I know all the lines of, I know all the words of, and I could watch. Yeah, I walk into a room, I see it, I'll watch it every single time.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. It's a the genre that it seems to be shrinking a little bit.
yes. And obviously, like video killed the radio star, streaming killed movies, and streaming killed movie stars. There are no real movie stars anymore, or certainly not like there used to be, at least up until the 90s. And then and I'm fuzzy on the statistics, but I think of all movies, female leads are only like 9% of movies made. So that's a really small proportion of all movies made. And so if it is, it's usually an action movie, or if it is a female lead, it's a romantic movie about finding a partner. And so one thing I like about this movie is that it has a female lead, and it's granted there is a love interest component, but that is not the main theme of the movie. And how many
Yeah, it's a
female full
secondary.
lead
Yeah.
yes, yeah, how many female lead movies have you seen where it's not about finding a mate? And so I love a good romantic comedy. I love a good romance movie. I'm not anti-romance. I'm not anti-man, but I would love to see something that is different and interesting. So I just want a little bit more unique storytelling. That's what I'm hungry for.
Yeah, I think it's a fair ask. I mean, your point about streaming killing movie stars. I mean, I think that's true. I think it's also sort of killed movie theaters and
Yes.
like the movie theater experience. I used to love going to the movies. You know, it's sort of something I used to get excited for. Um, and then it became less and less fun. And then I feel like COVID and streaming was like a 1-2 punch. And I
Yes.
was like, I cannot handle this anymore. But part of it is like, well, if you can't have people actually going to movies, or a much smaller percentage of people actually going in person, well, it's like, what do you need movie stars for? Because like, if they're not
Right.
bringing people in person, then
Mhm.
it's just about volume. It's not
Mhm.
about the individual draw.
Yes, and streaming, it's really fractured media. Like again, I recently just the other day I posted on social media about the rehearsal and I was wondering like how many people have actually seen this? There are so many channels out there. Like and
Yeah.
Troy and I have talked about this, you and I, Morgan, when we were growing up, how many kids shows were there to watch? A handful, maybe.
Well, we had the dial. You
Yeah,
could
we
turn
had
the
like 4
dial, and there were
channels.
only 12.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, we didn't even like we watched Sesame Street, we watched Mister
uh,
Rogers,
and there weren't
but
even
like
shows on all the dials. Like on all 12
yes,
channels, there were only like seven at ones that
yes.
actually had programming.
But you and we can talk to anyone around our age, and they are all familiar with Sesame Street and Mister Rogers, and
Uh,
even like Disney Channel or even Nickelodeon for like the
it,
later 90s.
what's
But like kids today, when they are gonna talk, when they're adults and they're talking, what do you watch when you were a kid? What random YouTube channel were you watching? Like my child, like he's just like, I want to watch dirty cars going into a pool. That's what he likes to watch. And you know what? He
uh,
can find a YouTube channel that
I
caters
bet.
to that want. But there is no
Yeah,
universal TV or fiction diet for people
sure.
today. And so that's why there are no movie stars because everyone is in their own little echo chamber watching their own channel. And so they don't, not everyone's looking at Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman and saying, "Oh, that's a great movie. She's a beautiful lady. She's America's sweetheart." And
There,
so I think that's why streaming has killed movie stars.
there aren't movie stars anymore, and there aren't really TV stars either.
No.
Streaming's managed to kill both of them.
Yes.
Uh,
Think like Mad Men, like right around 2009 to 2011 was like the death rattle of that with like John Hamm
yeah,
and Bryan Cranston.
yeah. It's it's funny because I was, a week or two ago we were talking about like memorable TV show jingles. And
Mhm.
someone talked about like the Beverly Hillbillies. And like
Yeah.
I could do the whole jingle for like the Beverly Hillbillies, or
Mhm.
Gilligan's Island.
Yes.
Just because like I mean, how many times did you watch it? And like you don't fast and back then you couldn't fast forward through the
Had
jingle.
to sit through it all.
Um, you got to sit through it all. You got to be there on time. You got to be sitting there on time. But yeah, it's definitely a different experience. And you're right. Like no one, there isn't must see TV. It's all diffuse,
Yes.
and it's more. There's a ton of it, and you have no idea if anyone else is watching the same
Yes,
stuff.
and so that's why I put that out there. I'm like, anybody who I want to talk to people about this. Has anybody seen it? And I was shocked that you had, and shocked that
Yeah,
two people in my social network have seen it. I'm sure there are more, but like I was like,
I know.
I
I
don't
know
know, can I
more.
even talk
Yeah,
to you about things anymore? So
yeah,
that's why
yeah.
you
It's
and I are
tough.
talking about movies from the 80s and 90s. 'Cause hopefully
Yeah, we're going
people,
back. But the good news is, like I think, yeah, there's always cycles. I don't know how it's gonna work out, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of pivot back at some point. Um, maybe maybe not to TV per se, but maybe movie stars will make a comeback. I don't know. It's so difficult. But the problem I have with streaming is I feel like a lot of these streaming networks are like, okay, well, here's the formula I want. This is like the general story I want. And sometimes I feel like each streaming service basically has the same movie, but like with different But it's like it's basically the same plot, or it's like, well, how special of a movie can it be if there's 15 nearly identical movies with the same tropes? Um, I don't know.
And one thing I liked, back in the day, I remember, you and I, we had recently moved, so we didn't have any friends locally. And this is when we like moved to Naperville. We had HBO and we would just put that sucker on and like we watched what was there. And like there's some kind of
Yeah,
beauty in that. Like you and I, we didn't craft like this is the exact movie I want to see with this star and I want this plot. Like we turned on and we watched what was there and it worked out just fine.
yeah.
In some ways, again, it opened our minds and we watched things we wouldn't have necessarily even known to look for. And that's kind of why I like going to bookstores. I like going to libraries because I love stumbling upon things without necessarily looking for them.
There's
And I think in
there's
the curated media age where you can have your own very crafted echo chamber, you're missing out on a lot of content that would otherwise open up your mind and introduce you to things that you didn't even know you liked.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was one of my nephews. Yeah, he was like obsessed with trains. And he would just watch like 6 hours of train videos because you can do that
Yes,
now. And it's like, look, maybe it's a little bit better to have to watch different shows and different
yes.
programming and be like, well, yeah, Sesame Street's over. We can't just watch, you know, 400
Almost
hours of
5 hours.
Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to wait a day or a week until it's
Yes.
on again. You got to have a little bit of range.
Yes.
There's some, and also like kind of like just making do with whatever's on the television. Don't tell mom the babysitter's dead. A lot of it's kind of making do with your circumstances. Like, okay, well,
Yes.
here's the cards you're dealt.
Hmm.
And sometimes I do think we are a little bit victims of choice. We have too much
Yes.
choice, or we have the ability. And I'd say too, it's like there's a little bit, there's always been sort of a tendency, for people to gravitate like, oh, well, you're the nerds, or you're the jocks, or you're the, whatever, and you kind of fall into a particular group. But now, like, those groups are even narrower, and you're like, and people are focused on an even, but like you really don't. It's like you like there's less and less shared experience. Like the Venn
Yes.
diagrams have less
Yes.
overlap with one another, and I don't know. I like being able to have common ground with folks. So I think it's a little sad, but who knows? Maybe we'll see. But that's whenever I I do like to be able to follow what's trending or what's in the current zeitgeist, because then it's like, oh, well, if other people are like, a lot of times I'll read a book. One of the things I like about book club is it forces me to read things that I know other people are reading and other people are interested in, because it pulls me out of that cocoon of just stuff I would pick. So like and maybe it's because our generation we had to do that. I was like, so for me it's a plus. For me it's a feature. It's not a bug where I
Yeah.
I sometimes sort of have to kind of do that.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm too old to be this worried about like the next gen, or I'm too young to be this worried about like the next generation. I feel like that's like an 80-year-old, 70-year-old thing, worried about the kids today. So I'm like you said, I'm hoping that there is a silver lining. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I'm overly hopeful, but I think they'll figure it out. I think the big problem is, like generationally, we have the biggest generation ever, is, you know, in retirement. So like, you have this thing, and they like that generation has exerted so much
Influence.
financial, cultural, political influence, you know, largely for the last 50 years. I mean, they've been so powerful as a generation. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think it's really difficult to know, like it's almost like a tsunami. It's like after that wave, passes, in 10 or 20 years, like I don't know. And it's interesting too because Generation X is actually a pretty small generation. Like the
Very.
millennial generation is actually the bigger wave. So it's like I don't know what the next waves are going to be or what it's going to look like. I try not to despair too much though, because it's like I think by and large, I think people respond. I think fundamentally people are rational, and they respond to uh, rewards and punishments. And I think if the rewards are there, they'll do it. And I think if the punishments are there, they won't do it. It's just a matter of right setting things. And like I like it when schools start to say stuff like, "Oh, we're gonna put away phones at least during the day," And I think there's always sort of the next iteration of corrections. Be like, okay, well, we realize too much of this is a bad thing, so we're gonna course correct, and moderate. I think people are getting more better at that. I mean, I talk to parents all the time about how do you monitor screen. How do you limit screen time, both parents and kids, because kids want to do it too. You know, um, even my kids, as part of their summer goals, have this is what I want to limit my screen time to. So, like, I think if you're forward thinking about it, I think that's a good sign.